And just start with Mr. Richards, and then the second question, Mr. Shield, and the third question, Mr.
Tiskevich.
Did I get it right, Mark? As you can see, not everyone knows how to pronounce his name. Okay, Mr. Richards, you first. 3 minutes. Why? And who? Just introduce yourself. Let us know.
Well, my name's Ronnie Richards, but I don't really think I need to say that because most of you I've spoken in front of time and time again. I did not wear a tie today. You've all seen me in a suit and tie time and time again, and I'll have one on for the Golden Donkey Dinner. I think that's something that's is wrong with the government. I think they choke them to death with ties, and they cuts off the blood flow in their neck, and they don't make good decisions. Like I say, you can go to my website and you can read all about me. www.ronnierichardforcongress.com. That's with Ronnie with a Y. So I don't think I need a lot of introduction. What I want to talk about is commitment. I counted up on my calendar the other day. This is my 19th trip to Clermont County in the last 13 months. I think that ought to tell you something about my level of commitment to this race and to the western part of the district, since I'm from the eastern part of the district. I've been here twice as many times as I've been to Ross County. So, I'm willing to do the work. I put 25,000 miles on a 2000 Buick. And my wife's getting a little bit nervous about the amount of money that's disappearing out of our retirement fund financing this campaign, but I tell her, don't worry, the Lord will provide. So I don't really have anything else to say. I relish your questions. I'm waiting for them. I hope I have sufficient answers, and thank you for having me tonight.
Mr. Shield.
Hi, for those of you that have not met me yet, my name is John Shield, and I'm running for your vote. I'm asking for your vote on May 6th in the Democratic primary for the Ohio 2nd Congressional District. I'm running in this race because I grew up around here and I feel I can carry our voice to Washington. In all the years that I've studied law and economics, there's one thing for certain. That is that you don't achieve liberty by tearing the government down, but by using the power of government effectively and efficiently to build the people up. I'm building a campaign around empowerment, opportunity, and innovation, which are the key planks in my platform. Empowerment, I would like to see a better educational system. I'd like to see young people have a greater opportunity to succeed in this world. I'd like to see our 22 and 23-year-olds not graduate with $30,000, $40,000 worth of student loan debt. Opportunity, I'd like to see a lot more opportunity for everyone. As I travel across the district, all the way from Portsmouth to Mount Adams, all the way up into Springfield Township, there is one constant. And that is that everybody wants to see their family and their community thrive, and everyone feels insecure in their job and in the economy. So I want to see a greater focus from Washington on lifting people up and providing opportunities for folks to succeed. And innovation, a lot of people ask what that is. Well, we've cut a lot of funding in the government, added funding in the military, but we've cut a lot in science and technology and in infrastructure. And we've got a bridge that's functionally obsolete right there over the Ohio River, Brent Spence. We've got an energy grid. The Wall Street Journal says if a terrorist were to blow it up, they only need to blow up 9 substations and 1 transformer company, and that could shut down our energy grid for up to 18 months. That's something that Congress should be focused on. If we have a brownout in New York City, the West Coast grid can't help. We have very poor interconnectivity in our energy infrastructure. And we have very poor use of what is a growing industry in solar and wind, and we need to increase that. There are more jobs in green and renewable energy than there are in oil and gas and coal. All of those industries are shrinking. So I want to focus on the future and get our government focused on the road ahead. And I'm asking for your vote to do that, because we, the people, can make a difference. We can fight the flood of money that's coming in from the right. We can get out there and get out the vote, and we can make a difference in Washington. And with your help, I will. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tiskevich.
Well, first of all, you can tell I have a Polish name. Last 2 syllables are Kevich. First syllable is Tis, Tiskevich, Mark Tiskevich. And I always have to start out with that, but if you feel more comfortable, Mr. T works also. That's what I was called when I was a high school math and physics teacher. I am the son of Polish immigrants. They came to this country like many other immigrants looking for the American dream. My parents had no money when they came to the country. My dad got a job working for the state, for the Department of Transportation, working on the highways. And he was the breadwinner for our family. I don't think he ever made more than $20,000, but he was able to save. He bought a modest farm, 2-bedroom farmhouse, 80 acres. He raised me and my 3 brothers, so 4 sons, and put us all through public university, which is very hard for someone in this day and age to do with that income, which is why education is so important to public education. So I have a degree in mathematics. I started out as a high school math and physics teacher. I did that for a few years before I discovered what an actuary was. And if you don't know what an actuary is, we use math and science to predict how much things are going to cost in the future, what financial obligations are going to be in the future. So I primarily work with governmental plans, governmental entities all across the country, tell them what their pension obligations are, what their health care obligations are, and how much we need, how to fund those, and how to pay those promises off. So as a teacher, actuary, I'm also a small business owner. I own a yoga studio in Hyde Park. It's called Move Your Height. My wife thought of the name. So that's who I am. A teacher, actuary, business owner. The theme of my campaign is integrity. The website's electintegrity.com. Integrity has 2 components, a moral component and being unimpaired, like a bridge is an integrity if you can cross and it doesn't collapse. Under both definitions, Congress isn't in integrity right now. It's the least productive Congress in modern history. So I firmly believe if we elect politicians with integrity from both sides, Democrats and Republicans, we can get Congress working again with integrity. We can start moving the country forward. So I'm looking forward to talking with you and answering some more of the questions. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Well, there. Mark. See, I can't get his name right for love of money. And I have Marsha Oganowski to help me here. Okay. Why do you think you should be elected to Congress? What matters?
Well, like I said when I started off, if we elect politicians with integrity, a lot of the problems just become obsolete, right? We have all these problems with campaign finance reform. We can pass all the rules we want, but politicians without integrity are going to figure out ways around it. So the most important thing is find politicians with integrity from both sides and elect them. I think I'm ideally suited for Congress because of my background. I was a public school employee, a teacher. I was in the teachers union when I was a teacher. I'm an actuary who's experienced in working with government entities, from the city of New York to the state of California, working with them on how to fund their financial obligations. So I'm fiscally responsible. I'm also socially progressive, which I think most of the country is. And I think that's the ideal combination to be able to win this district. To attract the Democrats, not just the Democrats, the 20 to 30,000 independents who voted Republican in the past election that we need to win this election. So, the other thing, I'm a business owner. And so the combination of being a business owner, I'll be able to speak with independents and bring the kind of common sense to Washington that we need to tackle with, how the Affordable Care Act affects businesses and however other social programs are funded and administered.
Mr. Richards.
Give me that one more time. Repeat the question, please.
How do you intend to, why do you think you're a better person for Congress than, say, Brad Wenstrup?
There we go. Here's what I think. I think when we set up this country, of course, we set up the House of Congress bicamerally. Sort of like they did in England. There was supposed to be a House of Commons and a House of Lords. Well, what we have now is we have two Houses of Lords. And what I bring to the table is a totally different perspective. I've looked at this, and I am the 2nd District. I have a very varied background. I've been a business owner running a pre-commercial thinning business when I was way younger on the West Coast as a farmer. I've also been a state employee with 9 years experience as my chapter secretary of my union. And now I grow fruits and vegetables and sell them at the local farmers market. I know the 2nd District inside and out. I feel like that I'm very much akin to them. And the other thing I can say is that I'm the endorsed candidate from Labor. Labor's Local 83 in Portsmouth, Ohio. And so I know Labor and I know the business end of it, and that's about all I can say is why I think I'm the best fit, and why I also think that I'd be very effective in Congress, because I speak for the working class, and I think we need more of those in Congress.
Mr. Shield, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, that's all right.
Okay.
I feel I'm best qualified to represent our area in Congress for many reasons. Not least of which, I've lived all my life in this area. I grew up just down the road. I live on the border of Hamilton and Clermont County. I've spent a lot of my life in this area working. I've been in big business, I've been in small business, I've started my own business. I grew up in a family where we were taught to whom much is given, much is expected. And I grew up with a good community, good schools, and a great family, and a lot of opportunities that just don't seem to be there for the future generations. And that's what drives me. I'm very concerned about my children and other families in this district. Now, I was taught that we have to be an advocate for our communities. In law school, we're made to learn the ins and outs of the Constitution and the federal system. If you haven't been to law school, it's sort of like a very long, extended civics class in high school, sometimes too long. Anyway, I worked my way through law school in the court system, and I've seen on the front lines how a good law can help a lot of people, and how a bad law can really harm a lot of folks. I'll never forget sitting there listening to Judge Walker say to someone who came in that he just couldn't help them. As much as he wanted, he couldn't do anything about it. And this young gentleman was begging and pleading because he wanted to change his station in life. He wanted to expunge his record, and unfortunately the law was written the way that it was, and he said, I'm sorry, as a judge, I'm bound by the laws. If you don't like the laws, you're going to have to change them, and you're going to have to go to your legislature to do that. So with the legal education and training that I have gained over the years, with the opportunity to live in a good community and represent a good family and the families of this district, I feel I can carry our voice to Washington. I can bring the common sense leadership that so many of us talk about. I can fight for the working class. I live paycheck to paycheck many months. I know what it's like to have multiple jobs and to try to just make ends meet. And I know what it's like to rely on a strong public education system for my children. And I want to see those opportunities there for the future. Not only that, I want to commit to fulfilling our promise to our seniors and make sure that we are solvent with Social Security. I think you don't need a math degree necessarily to solve Social Security. You just need the political will to make the changes that are necessary. We know the solutions, and we can implement them. But it takes all of you participating. And so I'm going to keep asking for your support. I believe I am the most qualified candidate because I can build a bridge among different ideologies. And with my experience and training and background, I can write better laws.
Okay, we'll just finish off with this because it follows right in. And we'll start with you, Mr. Shield. How do you intend to overcome the built-in Republican advantage in this district? You've been gerrymandered to within a gnat's eyelash of irrelevance. So just how would your campaign deal with that?
Well, there's twofold. All right, the first is that the issues that I talk about really aren't very partisan. Everybody needs a good job. Everybody needs a better opportunity. Everybody wants their child to have a good opportunity to go to a good school and to get ahead in life. That's the American dream. That's not a Republican problem or Democratic problem, that's an American problem. And for too long, we've had this failure of trickle-down economics that has shrunk the middle class and has kept the working poor down and has only allowed the wealthiest among us to flourish. Now, people care about Wall Street when they have a lot of money to spend, but most of us just care about having enough money in our pockets to buy groceries at the market down the street. So I think when we talk about this in Adams and Brown counties, some of these places where there are very few Democrats, the message resonates. And so I think having the right message, that is one piece of it. The other piece of it, certainly, is getting the ground game out. The Obama campaign showed us how to do it. Wellstone was a great asset to my team, and it confirmed that our plan of direct voter contact is the #1 way to convince people to show up to the polls and to vote. Not just voting for the party, but voting for the best ideas. I've met a ton of Republicans out there as I knock on doors who say, you know, I once was a Democrat, but either I don't like Tim Burke, that happened to me yesterday, someone said, I don't like Tim Burke, so I'm now a Republican, but I'm pretty moderate. So we need a lot of the moderate Republicans who have been disaffected by the way that Washington has been working for the past few years, people who are fed up with gridlock and obstruction, get them to come over and look at the future and put people first, put people above politics. So we want to get the government working for the people again, moving the ball forward for America. And that's my message, and I'm going to bring a very large team out in the field in order to get the votes to do that.
Mr. Tiskevich.
Yeah, perfect. So to beat Brad and his advantage, to win this race, the candidate's going to have to do 3 things. One, the person is going to need to raise approximately $1 million. Second, the campaign will need to turn out the Democratic vote. And even with those 2 things, you're still going to need to turn about 20,000 to 30,000 independents who voted Republican in the last election to vote Democrat. Now, you know, regarding the first hurdle, $1 million, you know, our campaign's already hired a fundraising firm out of DC. We've been working with them over the last month. They've put together a plan on how to raise this money. In the latest report they gave me, they've identified $1,356,100 potential contributions that can be raised. And this is a combination of, you know, call time by me, which I've been doing over the last month, calling, you know, every person I know across the country and a lot of people I don't know. Fundraising events, digital fundraising, finance committee activities, labor PACs, and interest group PACs. So once you raise this money, then you have to spend it. So how do you spend it? Well, mass media, predominantly television ads, targeted direct mail, paid staff with canvassing field operations. We would have an office in Scioto County and Hamilton County. And then we'd hire this consulting firm out of Chicago. They're comprised of former Obama staff members who know how to build a grassroots infrastructure. So we're going to hire these guys, have them help us build the structure from Hamilton to Scioto. And then the third piece is how do you inspire the 20,000 to 30,000 independents who voted Republican now to vote Democratic. And that's where I come in with, you know, my business background, my fiscal responsibility as an actuary. You know, I can talk to these people about Social Security, to the seniors about Social Security. I can talk to people about the Affordable Care Act. You know, I've done healthcare evaluations for the state of California. I know, you know, how health premiums are set and how they're trending. My whole family's on the Affordable Care Act as of January 1st. So I've got a lot of items to talk with these independents about and convince them that where the Tea Party is taking the Republican Party is not where they're at. That they're in the middle, and the Democratic platform is a lot closer to the way they think and live than what the Tea Party is currently pushing.
Thank you. Mr. Richards, would you like me to
Nope.
meet? Okay,
I got it.
Good.
Bill Smith ran last time, was your Democratic nominee. he got 43% of the vote. He never raised $1, and he never made one campaign appearance. So there is 43% right there. What I have to do is convince another 7% to vote for Ronnie Richards, and I can do that. I have a very good friend named Paul Worley, who's an Adams County Commissioner. He's a Democrat. He's the first elected Democrat in Adams County in a coon's age, or God knows when, or any way you want to put it. The way Paul Worley did it was direct voter contact. I have the team in the eastern part of the district to do that right now. In fact, they're doing it right now. Representative Wenstrup, I look for him to lay low. He's had a very rough year voting against this, and I don't know that he oh yes, he did vote against a veterans bill that I would have also voted for. Every other thing else he's voted against, and there's a lot of things he voted against that I would have voted for, like mostly everything. You look at his record, he voted against Sandy Lee. Everybody up and down the river that's in the floodplain, or even if you live up the Souder River or the Little Land River or wherever, you ought to be really concerned about that, because is he going to come to your rescue? Well, yes, he will, but that just makes him another hypocrite. I'm going to attack him on the ACA. I am not going to back up on that. Although I'm a single payer guy, it's the system we have now, and we're going to work with it. He voted against the Violence Against Women Act. How is he going to? We should be getting women in our camp, and we can do that. By the way, if you're a woman and you're still concerned about we don't have an Equal Rights Amendment, I am the endorsed candidate for Progressive Democrats of America, the ERA Action 3-State Strategy Team. He voted against the Farm Bill. Now, I didn't like the Farm Bill, but I would have held my nose and voted for it. Sometimes you have to cut the best deal, and that's the art of compromise. And like I've said time and time again, I'm not going to push back against Representative Wenstrup. I'm going to punch back. And when I get done with him, his mother won't vote for him.
There's two questions actually in one here. What do you believe is the best opportunity for economic development in the 2nd District? What steps would you take in Congress to bring jobs here? And on a side note, do you have strategic and tactical specifics for stimulating the economy overall?
Well, strategically and tactically to stimulate the economy overall is, this isn't rocket science. We've known how to do this for years. If you look at our most rapid period of growth probably came out of the Second World War, when we built tanks and planes and M1 rifles and armed the whole world to defeat the Nazis. There is no reason that we cannot apply that peacefully. We don't have to kill half the world and get our troops killed if we invest in a green energy future. And it's out there. It is ripe for the picking. And you know, I hate to say that I'm a soothsayer and a seer, but I am. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, and it's going to happen for the life of the planet. We cannot continue on the coal, gas, oil future that we have. We're going to kill the planet. As far as specifically the 2nd District, we have 5 small universities in the district. We have look, UC Clermont, Southern States, OU Chillicothe, Chatham, and Shawnee State University. If I could just look at Shawnee State because that's home to me. If I could just look at that for an example, we graduated plastics engineers, ceramic engineers, graphic designers there, and what we didn't do is they came out of school with no jobs. Now what I'd like to see is a public-private consortium of the government to get together with the universities to fund you know, small businesses in these small university specialties. I mean, we treat these kids like cash cows. You know, we just, you know, the student loan rates are just over the top. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they ought to just write John's loans off. You know, I mean, if you're going to create jobs in the community and help people and stuff like that, that's what it's all about. You used to be able to get a job out of high school, you know, and so now you can't get a job out of high school. High school's free. How come college isn't free? If you look at the Western democracies, they fund 70% of higher education. But this is what we need to do. We need these private, public, and government things to go together with our universities to create some sort of small business drivers. And that's what I think the answer is.
Thank you. Mr. Shield.
Well, thanks, and thanks, Ronnie, for offering to write off my loans.
If it was me, I would.
Okay, well, that's a tough act to follow, because I do have quite a few student loans, and I'm very concerned about the future of our students. However, I do agree on the strategic public-private partnerships, but I think it takes the will of certain aspects of the government to get involved, and it takes private enterprise to be there to pick up the slack. Now, part of my plan really deals with infrastructure, both in regular traditional infrastructure, as well as in higher tech infrastructure, but it also has to do with using the Department of Veterans Affairs and a local company here in the logistics world that has a very high turnover but a very strong retention rate among veterans. I'd like to create, and we've been talking back and forth with the heads of this company, to create a strategic public-private partnership that would create a veterans relocation program right here in the Pierce Township, West Clermont School District, to try to help some of these logistics folks retain their people, but also build their community. Now, the Veterans Administration, I think, needs to be utilized so that not only can these folks come here, but then most of these veterans, who are, a lot of them are young, can utilize more of their educational benefits. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach, and it's more complex than perhaps a brief 3-minute discussion. But I want to mention a couple of things. I've been working with a company that has an interest in broadband Wi-Fi, and the discussions that we've been having are that through work with the federal government, the Science, Space, and Technology subcommittee or committee, that we can divert a little bit of resources, very modest amount, to put in broadband Wi-Fi across Adams and Brown counties. Now, when you think about what you can do with a broadband repeater the size of my house that can cover one of these glaciated areas that's a big flat plain, you can have all of the school children in that area have immediate access to the world's greatest libraries, Google at their fingertips. You can also help cottage industries, agricultural products, hit the market without friction. There's a lot we can do, but it takes the political will to do it. So I have a long list of things, and you can see it on my website, shieldforcongress.com. I'd love to talk to all of you individually about how we plan on doing this, but it's centered around infrastructure. We've got to get the political will around the Brent Spence Bridge. We've got to get that funding moving again. That'll create jobs. It's not necessarily, the bridge isn't in District 2, but all the people who will work on it are. We've got to get science and technology funding flowing again, and we've got to get our veterans and our school children and college-age kids the opportunity to be better, to have a better job.
Okay, Mr. Tiskovich, do you need for me to repeat?
No, I got it. So I'm a firm believer where there's a will, there's a way. You know, so we had a will to go to war with Iraq and Afghanistan, and we funded those wars over the last 10 years to the tune of about $3 to $4 trillion. I know the Tea Party likes to talk about how much we're in debt and how much we can't afford something, but then when we have to go to war, when we have the will to go to war, you know, we can come up with, you know, $3 to $4 trillion. Do you know what that $3 to $4 trillion could have bought us? I mean, it could have bought us tuition for every 2-year and 4-year college program in the U.S. for the next 52 years. All right, can you imagine what this economy would be like if tuition was paid like that for the next half a century? Can you imagine if doctors, if anybody who wanted to be a doctor could become one without costing an arm and a leg and running up the debt? You know, what would that do to the cost of our health care if we flooded the free market with doctors? All right? You know, so there's a tremendous amount we can do when we have the will. So the money, you know, if I'm elected, we can get money allocated for jobs programs. I think part of it should go to education. Specifically, I would expand the Pell Grant program. You know, Pell Grants right now provide grants. You don't have to pay them back to students in financial need. It's about $5,600 a year. I think that should be expanded dramatically to cover the cost of a full year of college. So especially for people unemployed in our district, you know, have a Pell Grant program expanded, let them go to college, learn new skills. I think part of that program should be expanded to provide on-campus jobs for them also. So if they're driving into UC or wherever, you know, that they can actually do one trip, you know, get their education and then work on in some field related to what they're studying and make some money for the gas and for the insurance and for the car payment it takes to get there. The other part of the money, I would go to rebuilding the infrastructure, expanding utilities, broadband. But I would have a program where the local leaders would actually have to submit bids and say, this is what I want to use the money for. This is how many local jobs it's going to create. This is how it's going to benefit the community. So I don't want to specifically sit there and say, this money is used for this, this, and this. I want the community to come back and say, this is how we'll use their money. We'll figure out the best way to allocate those resources.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Tiskevich, we will start the next question with you, and this is a follow-on because you all have talked about something that, again, is going to be hammered and hammered and hammered. And I don't know if everyone in here is obviously aware of this, but when the Republicans speak of doing things, they cite taxpayers. When Democrats talk about improving society, they speak of citizens. And so what I would like each of you to do, starting with you, Mark, is give me your rundown on the taxpayer versus citizen analysis, because it's going to come at you constantly. They talk about taxpayers, they talk about stakeholders, we talk about citizens. It's almost as if we're talking about two different people, but trust me, we are. Please, just it's.
Yeah, it's, all right, well, this is symptomatic of what's going on in our corporations too with CEOs. I mean, it's the exact same story. It went from stakeholders, the employees, you know, the community and shareholders to just shareholders. You know, what's the best way we can maximize profit to our shareholders, and that means moving jobs overseas, so be it. So this is a whole paradigm shift that's been happening in the last 20 years that we need to come back to. But, you know, as far as taxes go, I mean, the taxes for the 1%, the top bracket, are the lowest they've been in decades. And I think we live in the wealthiest country in the history of this planet. And I think those who are better off can afford to pay a little more in taxes. And I'm also a believer, you know, in what do you do with this tax money? I'm a believer in Keynesian economics. That when you spend the money in the community and the economy, it just doesn't disappear, it comes back. And I'll give you an example. I mean, you know, I'm going to show you how this $1 is actually equal to $6 under Keynesian economics. All right? So say I owe you $2, you owe Charlie $2, he owes me $2. I give you the dollar, you give him the dollar, he gives me the dollar. Now it's worth $3 and half our debt's paid off. I give you the dollar back, you give him the dollar, he gives me the dollar. Now it's worth $6 and all of our debt's paid off. Now that's kind of a simplistic example of, you know, offsetting debt. But Keynesian economics works a lot like that. The faster you move the money through the economy, every transaction's taxed. And those taxes go back to the local, state, and federal government. It doesn't disappear. So our goal, you know, when we collect these tax revenues, is to get it back in the economy and get it moving as quickly as possible, and then it comes right back to the government. And that's how we, make sure our debt doesn't balloon with respect to our gross domestic product.
Mr. Richards.
Mr. Richards?
Yes.
Okay. As far as tax rates go, at the end of the Second World War, the tax rates on the top 2% were 94%. Now, nobody would say that that wasn't a bad investment to beat the Nazis, and everybody thought, well, the tax rates would just bottom out after that. Well, they were 91% during the Eisenhower administration. And then JFK, since his dad was a rich guy, he decided the rich folks were paying too much taxes, so he decided to convert them down to around 71%. They stayed there pretty well static through the Vietnam War and through the Nixon administration until Ronald Reagan came and convinced everybody that the government was their enemy and not their friend. And they dropped until the George Bush rate, when they dropped them down to 20-some%, and actually when you figured out all your loopholes and deductions, they were more like 14% for the, that's what Mitt Romney paid. And I think he's probably got enough money in a foreign bank account. As far as debt loads, we've carried debt loads in this country since the Jackson administration, meaning Andrew Jackson. There have been times that the debt loads have been higher than they are right now. I cannot wait until Representative Wenstrup wants to talk to me about the national debt of $17 trillion, because the trouble is that nobody can understand it because there's too many zeros on the end. It's the same thing as if you owned a $100,000 house and you only owed $17,000 on it. That's not too bad, is it? I also figured out against GDP and net wealth in the United States, and my share of the national debt isn't really $56,000 like they say, which would be $250,000 if you had a family of 4. My share is more like $368, and I'm ready to write my check right now. I would like for Bill Gates to write his check. I'd like Warren Buffett to write his check, and I'd like Representative Wenstrup to write his check. And if they are really serious about erasing the national debt, I'm ready.
Mr. Shield, you want to repeat that?
No, I think I got it. I think that the crux of your question is whether or not, how we would respond to this dichotomy between citizens and taxpayers. Well, as I said the other night, some of you may have heard me say this, it seems more and more that the grand old party has become not grand old party GOP, but guard our privilege GOP. And those folks in Washington seem to represent more and more of the millionaires and the billionaires rather than the people that elected them. 70% of our economy is driven by consumer spending. And if let me just ask you, how many pairs of jeans do you think a billionaire wears or buys in a year? We've all seen, many of us have seen the movie Inequality for All. It does a great job of illustrating that it's not that the wealthies are making too much, it's that they're spending too little. It's that all of us who don't have the money in our pockets can't stimulate the economy, and that's where you get Keynesian economics. In a downturn, you need the economy to be stimulated by government spending, but you don't need it to be spent on programs that build another tank or that tell the Secretary General of the Army to buy 1,500 more tanks when we've got 1,500 of them sitting in a parking lot. We don't fight wars with heavy infantry anymore, and we shouldn't be spending all of our money. We spend more than the next 13 countries combined on our military infrastructure. Now, the difference really is between the citizen versus taxpayer is that the discourse seems to be that those people who are paying a lot in taxes, i.e. those people with millions and millions and millions of dollars, because even if it may only be 14%, through their capital gains tax, that's a lot more than I pay in raw numbers. But that doesn't give them and their power of the vote any more power than my vote. And so all of us have to get out there and vote so that we can be voting for all the citizens. We're taxpayers too, it's one and the same. Now you brought up citizenship, and I want to briefly mention that there are 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country, and we need to find a pathway to citizenship for those folks, so that they can fully participate in the economy through by and large, younger, hardworking. They're contributing in sales tax and in a number of other ways to our communities. We need to open up a pathway so that those folks can be full citizens, and if they pay a premium for the first 5 or 10 years when they're citizens in their tax penalties, then we're adding to the money that we've got to pay down the national debt. So we do need to talk about citizens. We need to talk about the rights and privileges of all citizens, and it doesn't matter how much is in your bank account. It matters your participation and your vote.
Thank you. Okay, well, Mr. Shield, we'll start with you on the next question. Congressional gridlock is obviously a big concern to all. Beyond compromise, what will you do to break the gridlock? How far would you go in the spirit of compromise? Where is the line between representing your constituents and working with the Republicans?
Wow. That's a great question. As an attorney, I've represented folks in business deals, small and large, represented folks in their most personal times when they're breaking up their marriage and dissolving, and it can be a very painful and difficult process. And often what I have to say to folks is that sometimes compromise is an agreement in which both sides are equally dissatisfied. That's not the style of leadership, though, that we need in Washington. We need a leadership that builds a bridge so that folks can understand that you have their value system at heart and that they will be willing to work with you when the time comes. Now, there are some bills that would be put forth by Democrats that Republicans would never vote for, and vice versa. However, I believe in being a good steward of the fiscal dollar, of the federal dollar. I believe in being fiscally responsible. I believe that waste in government can be redirected towards programs that help people. And I think there's a lot of people on the other side of the aisle that would agree with me on that. I know that Rand Paul has a very good idea as far as funding for the Brent Spence Bridge. I'd like to talk to him about that. There are a lot of folks that will follow Rand Paul's lead just because he happens to be sitting sort of in that discussion of whether or not he's going to run for president. But there are other leaders in Washington who I think will do a better job, namely Hillary Clinton. But I think that Rand Paul has a future, and he will still be in the Senate when I get there to the House of Representatives. And I think that it's going to take the House and the Senate to sit down and really figure out what it is that's in the best interest of this country. And wasted federal spending is not in anybody's best interest. So you have to find that value proposition that the Tea Party and the ultra-right has and figure out what sensible policies, what few there may be, and bring them into the fold, and then work towards the better future for all Americans.
Thank you. Mr. Tiskovich, do you want to repeat the question?
No, the question was how am I going to compromise?
Not your principles, but...
Yeah, no, but you know, I agree with John. You know, compromise has bad connotations to it. You know, when you compromise, there's a sense of resignation. And I don't like to use the word compromise. I use the word negotiate. You know, when you negotiate, by definition, both sides win. In compromise, you know, you're giving up some. So I like to focus on negotiations. Right now, there are no negotiations going on in Congress. You know, like I said, it's broken. It's the least productive Congress in modern history. We have votes out there that are symbolic votes. You know, it's like 50 votes to defund or repeal the Affordable Care Act. You know, that serves no purpose. It's going nowhere other than to get people's emotions going so they donate to the party. And that to me is being out of integrity. You know, if you're a politician with integrity, you don't put out votes that you know will be dead ends, that are only designed to get your base motivated to donate. So when I go to Washington, you know, that's going to be, I get along with a lot of people. I have, donors that are both Democratic and Republican, and they both resonate to the message of integrity. Bringing to integrity to Congress, it doesn't matter which side you're on. People recognize there's a person with integrity, that he's doing things and he's being in a way that's authentic. And so I'm going to remind the politicians that are sitting across the aisle from me when they're not being authentic, where they're being out of integrity. And then, also call them out on the facts. As a science teacher, as an actuary, I'm pretty good with those facts, and I can point out the flaws in their arguments. So I guess that's it, being authentic and negotiating and finding common ground.
Thank you. You want me to repeat?
No,
Good.
I'm not going to Washington to make enemies. Although I'm a core principle Democrat, I do not see the world in terms of black and white. I see the world in shades of gray. Everybody that knows me, I'm a facilitator. I was a forest firefighter as an occupation, and I'm much better at putting out fires than I am at starting them. If you'll look at my first statement in thing I called We Believe, it says we believe in the rights of labor to negotiate with management to the mutual benefit of all. And this is what we need to do. I've said time and time again, I will vote yes on any bill that helps the citizens of the 2nd Congressional District, and I will vote no on any bill that impacts them negatively. And you might call me an Alan Grayson with tact. I'm to the left, but I can work. I can work with those on the right. I know I can. You know, like I said, I'm not going to Washington to make enemies.
Starting with you, Mr. Richards. And these are the environmental questions, because what kinds of anti-contamination steps would you take to take a lead to see implementation of if bluegrass pipeline becomes reality? And another person throws into that, then how would you deal with Seacoast? This is going to fall in Congress's lap.
This Seco, that's the big thing out there.
Yes, that's the highest spot in Clermont County, and if it leaks, we're all drinking.
And you're throwing the bluegrass pipeline in there together.
Yeah, because they're both environmental issues. They both are.
Well, there's a lot of environmental issues in the Ohio River Valley, believe me. They have treated us as the nation's sewer, and well, if you just read they just came out and they said the Ohio River Valley has the dirtiest air in the country. Now that they cleaned up the smog in LA, you know. But we're sort of tired of being the whipping child of the petrochemical and gas industry, and that's sort of the way I approach this new bluegrass pipeline. I'm not in favor of it. And how you stop something like that, other than your vote in Congress, I wouldn't have a clue. You know, and that's the only thing I can say is that, you know, when I go there, you know, I will try to throw the anchor out as quickly as possible and try to stop that thing from coming through there. It's not like we think that there's not ever going to be a rupture or a leak in it. I mean, you can look around and we're dumping oil all over the world now. Every place we've got pipelines and ships and everything that, you know, wells in the Gulf of Mexico. I know we need the energy, but there is another way forward, and we're going to go there sooner or later. Just to make a point, I heard Ed Fitzgerald up in Chillicothe 9 months ago, and they talked about fracking. And he said, well, if they called fracking, they said it's going to be a bridge to the future. And, you know, my position is this: if it's going to be a bridge to the future, let's make it a really, really short bridge, like 3 to 5 years, and the clock's ticking right now. So, you know, let's get off this stuff. And I heard John make this point the other day, and I'll bring it up too. They have no idea what they're injecting into the ground, or they won't tell us. And now they want to ship the fracking fluids down the river. And as far as Seacoast, I don't know, you know, how do you go about cleaning that thing up, and what is the best thing to do there? There's a lot of questions to be asked, and that's the one thing I do know. I'm 65 years old, and I still don't have all the answers.
Do you want me to repeat?
No, you're asking about the Bluegrass Pipeline and Seacoast.
And just environmental issues, but those two in particular.
Well, I do think that we need a stronger voice in Washington as far as our environment is concerned. Our environment needs to be well represented. As far as the Bluegrass Pipeline is concerned, I think we need the grassroots activism that's happening right now. I think we need folks to know that they do have a choice as to whether or not they allow the pipeline on their land. They can tell the pipeline folks no, and there may be some strong opposition from the pipeline people to try to get an easement, to try to do a study on their land, and they may have a lot of financial incentives, but it's up to the people to figure out whether or not they want it. It's not necessarily the federal government's role to step in and tell a private landowner no, but it should be the federal government's job to make sure that there are environmental regulations in place so that if a spill occurs, if and when, that the right people are cleaning it up and they're punished for it, and that there should be very strong disincentives from a federal level to let these things happen in the first place. You know, if BP knew when they broke open the well in the Gulf of Mexico that they were going to be fined billions and billions of dollars right from the get-go, and that they couldn't defeat it just from a lawsuit, that maybe they would have been a little more safe with their actions. I think that's really the role of government, is to provide a bulwark against these corporate entities that will run roughshod over the private citizen in order to make an extra dollar. As for Seacoast, I think we need a comprehensive energy plan that includes what do we do with nuclear material after it's no longer being used for anything, after we're no longer producing nuclear fuel. There was a tweet that came out from a hedge fund gentleman who said that the nuclear fuel industry is dead. Just a day or two ago, he said the handwriting is on the wall. So it's very interesting to see that these investors and industry leaders are saying that nuclear is gone. But it's up to the United States government to make sure that there are sites like we had in Fernald that are cleaned up, and that property is usable for other things in the future. So I would say we need to strengthen the EPA. We need to make sure that regulations are being followed, and that sensible regulations are put in place moving forward.
Mr. Kiskevich, how about you?
Well, let me start with a bigger picture and, what I think our energy plan should be for the country. I believe that our solution to clean, affordable energy is in the works right now. It's 50 to 75 years away. It's nuclear fusion. There are a lot of scientists out there who say that we've solved the problem on how to compress hydrogen together to create helium. Helium, by the way, is a scarce resource right now. So instead of radioactive waste, like you do in nuclear fission, when you fuse hydrogen together, it creates helium, which is something you can sell. And they're so confident that this is going to work that they're building a demonstration power plant right now in France. 7 countries are working together to do this. The European Union, France, and the United States are 3 of them. And so when that goes online, they're going to actually show that for the first time you can create more electricity than you put into the reaction. And if the plant gets wiped out, because it's based on pressure instead of heat, the pressure disappears, the reaction stops, there's no fall, there's no meltdown. So I think we've got the solution. Our problem now is not to destroy the environment in the next 50 years while this comes online. So I'm a big believer in conservation. I'm a big believer in solar and wind. Our yoga studio, our business, is an EPA Green Power partner. We have all of our electrical power provided by Cincinnati Energy, which buys their energy from wind farms. We drive a Chevy Volt. We were able to get 10,000 miles on it with only 3 tanks of gas. The only times we had to fill it up is when my wife drove it to Columbus. If we drive around Cincinnati, we never put gas in it. So I think we have tools to conserve energy. As far as pipelines go, nuclear fission, I'm a big believer that we shouldn't be mining our finite resources and pumping them as quickly as possible. They're finite. Let's kind of slow down on all these pipelines. Let's slow down on drill, baby, drill. and let's just conserve more. The stuff that's out there now, let's enforce the regulations. They're there to the fullest extent, and just protect and do what we can now until the cheaper clean power comes online.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here. Starting, and they're all around the Affordable Care Act, protecting it. Do you think we can get single payer, and how to protect Social Security? So let me start again with you, Mr. Tiskovich, and see if I can put these together. How do you protect the Affordable Care Act? Would you be willing to move to a single payer system, and in the process, since it's all along there, protection of Social Security as one we're changing everything for the better. Let's make sure we take care of Social Security.
I know I got 3 minutes. Huh?
You got 3 minutes.
Okay.
You can't do it in 3 minutes. It can't be done.
All right. So, most Democrats were in favor of the single payer system. The Affordable Care Act was our compromise, our negotiations that President Obama put out there to have the free market take care of this situation. It's a fantastic thing. My whole family's covered under the Affordable Care Act. The most important thing is people with pre-existing conditions can no longer be denied coverage. Have everybody covered, as an actuary, I know that increases premiums. That increases the cost of healthcare. So what do you have to do? You have to get younger, healthier people covered. You saw just last week that we got over 7 million covered. We got healthier people in the system now that drives down premiums. The Affordable Care Act does it with both with carrots and sticks. The stick is if you're not covered, you get a tax. So if you make less than $20,000, $19,650, there's a $95 tax if you don't get covered. But it also gives you the carrot. If you make less than that, you have some rebates in your premiums that come in the form of your tax rate. So I think that's all good things. I mean, there's some elements of the Affordable Care Act that affect small businesses. There's this 30-hour requirement. There's this 50-employee requirement. And whenever you, as an actuary, whenever you put arbitrary constraints around it, there's going to be anti-selection. People are going to figure out ways, businesses are going to figure out ways to game systems around those cliffs. So, they're designed as sticks for the small businesses to implement it. If I change anything on the Affordable Care Act, I'd look at putting more carrots on there for businesses to provide the coverage. Because the stick's already there for the younger people. They're all looking for coverage. Everybody's looking for coverage. If we had a stronger economy, the businesses would naturally want to do this in the free market. They'd say, hey, I'm going to create this health plan to draw as many workers as I can to it. So, and last piece, Social Security. Social Security actuaries have done projections, and as little as 20 years, 19 years after this election, Social Security could run out of money, which means benefits are cut. They don't disappear, but they drop to like 70% of what you normally would get. So the solution there is simple. You have to put more money into it. As a pension actuary, I know pension benefits aren't funded with warm feelings and good wishes. They're funded with cold hard cash. And so to fix Social Security, you're going to get more cash into it. And I yield my remaining 15 seconds.
Mr. Roberts, it's the amalgam of Affordable Care Act, Social Security, and single payer. You already mentioned that you were a single payer guy. I think most people in the room are. So, how do you plan to make sure that we can protect these?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Very simply, I don't hear quite as well as these younger gentlemen. Social Security, that's a no-brainer, and that's the easiest fix there ever was in the whole world. Right now, you pay Social Security tax on $110,000 of income. If they took the cap off that, Social Security is funded forever, no sweat, no problem. The ACA was a Republican plan in the first place. It's what Romney Care is in Massachusetts. It was first proposed, if I'm not mistaken, by the Heritage Foundation. It was Richard Nixon's plan back in 1968. Am I a single payer proponent? You bet. Always have been, always will be. For those that are concerned about the insurance industry, that it might go, belly up, I'll tell you a quick story. My father was an insurance company executive out of Colonial Health and Accident in Cleveland, Ohio. In 1968, when they passed Medicare, all the rest of the insurance company executives said, we're out of business. We're out of business. My father said, no, we're going to make more money than we ever made before. Well, how are you going to do that? They gave all these people insurance. He said they gave insurance to people that never could afford insurance before. We're going to sell $6 and $9 riders to everything that Medicare doesn't pick up. And he was right. You can see what it's done for the insurance industry. They look like they're doing okay to me. So whenever we have single payer and everybody thinks they're out of business, no, they'll build their own private hospitals for the rich, or they will get every satellite channel and catered meals in 24-hour nursing for the rich. The insurance companies will be fine. Don't worry about them. Don't lose any sleep over the insurance companies.
Mr. Shield.
All right, so this is a three-part question, but a really one-part answer.
Yeah.
With the education and training in the law, I feel I can best write a better law, and that's really what Congress should be doing when they have a problem with a law that's passed. Instead, they're shutting down the government, which isn't fiscally responsible, costing the economy $24 billion. 0.6% of our GDP suffers because these folks can't get along. Now, I'm a defender of the Affordable Care Act. My family is on it as well. I do think, though, that there are parts of the Affordable Care Act that are harming some folks, and I think we need to take a close look at that. Why should a woman who's 55 years old, who doesn't have any children now and isn't planning on having any children in the future, pay for maternity care that she's never going to need? I do think we need to look very closely at there are elements of the law that are harming some folks. We need to address them. But, as Ronnie has said, a single-payer system is a very good idea. I think we do need some champions in Washington who are going to look to that. Now, if we increase Medicare for all type of a system, reduce the age limits, I think we can find a system that will allow, just as in Vermont, everybody to be in and nobody to be left out. We can stop talking about whether or not it's a tax or a penalty or a shared responsibility payment or any of these things that the Republicans want to say that's bad about the Affordable Care Act, and we can just focus on health care for everyone in the country. If we've got a country that's based on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, how can you have life and liberty when you don't have your health care? And when health care is a commodity that is bought and sold, I think every citizen in this country ought to be taken care of, at least the bare minimum. And if they show up to the emergency room, everybody else is paying for their care anyway. So we've got a more socialist system the way it was before the Affordable Care Act. So I'm a strong defender of that. I think there's a lot of steps forward for the American people. I am a proponent of a single-payer system. And I think that with Social Security, as Ronnie mentioned, you lift the caps and you've got the cash that Mark mentioned. It's not really a debate about cutting the benefits or lowering the retirement age. It's about having the political will to fulfill the promises that we've made to everyone in this country, that if you work hard, you can get ahead and you can retire, you can have something to live on in your advanced age.
I know that you can lay out the most intelligent of argument, and what you're going to get slammed with are these scare tactic issues. So without really addressing them separately, I would like for you to say, how would you in fact cope with the scare tactic issues that really get you off message?
All right. Well, when I was very early on in this race, when I was out in Brown County, I was told that Brown County voters only look at three things: how you stand on God, guns, and gays. That's it. when I was
Brown County, isn't
when I was walking through when I was walking in the parade in Adams County, now you can imagine this scene. I'm walking along in the parade and I'm shaking hands with everyone I can and trying to keep up with the float as I'm shaking hands. And someone says, "How do you feel about abortion?" And I thought, that's going to take a lot more time than the time that I have. But my answer was pretty simple, and that was that I think we've got smarter solutions to reproductive health in this country through greater access to contraceptive care. And that came out instantly, but really, the Affordable Care Act does a great job of protecting a women's right to choose. And quite honestly, root cause analysis 101 says that if you don't have the pregnancy, you don't have the abortion. The Guttmacher Institute says that we've got the lowest number of abortions in this country now than at any other time in American history. I think we need to have those kinds of policies that have put forth. I tried to tell my parents this before the election between Romney and Obama, because I read an article in the Catholic Telegraph that said that the president's policies were actually much better than Mr. Romney's policies would be as far as abortion. And it's because of that simple issue. Increased access to contraceptive care eliminates the need. Now, as far as women's rights are concerned, women's issues are economic issues. And so, again, talking to people in a very common sense way about how women can be full participants in the economy, how they can make their choice as to whether or not they want to have a family at this time or they want to pursue their career, I think that gives people a lot of freedom. And that's one way we can talk about it. As far as guns are concerned, I think the safest thing to say right now, I'm an attorney and I swore to uphold the law, both the Constitution of the United States and the laws of the state of Ohio. And I want to see people safe in their homes. I mean, the bottom line is, I don't want someone with a gun shooting my kid. I don't want my family to be affected by your right to bear arms. So I think we need reasonable, safe restrictions around guns. I think we need the CCW classes to have meaningful training. I think those are sensible reforms. I think background checks are sensible reforms. And when they try to distract you and divert you, you just say, look, I'm not trying to take your guns away. In fact, I'm trying to keep them safely locked up in your home.
We'll go backwards on this one. Mr. Richards.
There's some single issue voters you're just not going to win. And everybody knows that, but that does not mean that the 2nd District is not winnable. As soon as you asked that question, I wrote down the exact same thing that John opened with, guns, God, and gays.
We were at the same meeting.
Well, I've known that one since 2004, John. You know? But as far as abortion goes, my policy is the same as Bill Clinton's. Rare, safe, and legal. And I think contraception is the answer. As far as women's health goes, I believe that a woman has the exact same right to health care that a man does. Can you imagine that if men had the children, this wouldn't even be a topic of discussion? You know, and, you know, bluntly, that's the truth. And when they bring up God, you know, I mean, I was at the Pike County Fair, and the Republicans are set up right across from us, and here came one of them out of the booths with the Constitution in one hand and a copy of the Bible in the other one. And this really happened. And of course, one of my cohorts that was with me said, she just came unglued. And I said, Becky, you can't be on a political campaign and let this unhinge you. You know, so I tackle them one at a time, you know, and I try to be reasonable. And you cannot be reasonable with some people if they don't want to listen to reason. They say, how do you reconcile being a lay leader in the United Methodist Church with your stance on women's reproductive health? I said, you know, there's a lot of different interpretations of the Bible. So, you know, that's where I stand on that. And as far as guns go, I have a lot. But I do believe the Supreme Court really misinterpreted the Second Amendment when they said, you know, the part about the well-regulated commission or militia, they sort of threw that under the table and just sort of turned the floodgates loose. And really what we need is we need more intensive background checks to keep guns out of the hands of those that shouldn't have them. And if you are selling guns at a gun show, you are a firearms dealer. And you ought to be a licensed firearms dealer and, you know, do everything requisite with the law.
Mr. Tiskovich.
Well, I think the way you debate and argue these points is you use their own words against them. You use the conservative words, you know, small government and free markets. And then you wrap it all up with integrity. So how would let me hit each one of these guns. So I'm running a campaign of integrity. I've met a lot of gun owners in the district. I don't own a gun, but I've met a lot of gun owners who have a lot of integrity. And they have the same feelings I do. They want to keep their guns safe. We all believe in the same common sense, you know, expanded background checks, that kind of stuff. What I would do with guns is something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. I'd go one step further and talk about gun safety and applying technology to gun safety, and kind of in the same way we did to my Chevy Volt. You know, when I bought the Chevy Volt, I got a $7,500 tax rebate to promote green power. I think the federal government has a role that they could do in funding safe gun technology. So there's like biometric safes that open with your fingerprint that are expensive. You know, I think the government could do things to provide rebates for those to make them cheaper. There's emerging gun or safe gun technology where the gun will only fire for the proper owner. So there's a lot of stuff we could do where the Democratic Party could become, instead of the party that wants to take your guns away, the party that makes your guns safe. And the whole idea is that we're all people with an integrity, and we all want the safe things, safe guns. With women's rights, you know, I go to the small government. You know, I will never tell a woman what to do with her body. And if Brad Wenstrup wants to tell them, that's his fight. But I believe in small government when it comes to our private lives, whether it's, you know, women's rights, whether it's who you marry. We'll just keep the government small and let us live our private lives with integrity. As far as unions go, I always argue that unions are part of the free market. We have two people negotiating with the two sides negotiating. You know, you both have to have equal power. And with all the money, all the wealth that's transferred to one side of the table, the only natural counterbalance to that is unions. And they're part of the free market. Let the free market work and let's see what happens. So, you know, you use the small government, you use the free market, and then just talk about, remind everybody that we all have integrity.
Thank you. Are there any questions out there? Yes, ma'am.
One that I just thought of, but I did not submit, would be their opinion on arming school employees. That seems to be a very controversial subject right now.
Can I just do this?
I'm sorry, what?
It's a good idea.
Can I just do this? I don't have anything else to say on it, no.
I think we're all unanimous in saying that that's a bad idea.
Well, there was a cartoon in the Inquirer, was that yesterday or Saturday? The guy said, arming school employees, keep them safe. He said, yeah, just like it did at Fort Hood. So, just please, a short, why should we vote for you? So we'll start with Mr. Tiskovich. You start.
All right, so like I said, Tea Party, you elect a Tea Party or good Democrats run up to run against them. You have to decide which one of us is the guy who can beat Brad Wenstrup. You know, so which one of us can raise, you know, over $1 million to run against them? Which one of us can attract the independent voters? You know, the case for me, you know, independent women voters. I own a small business that caters predominantly to women. For seniors worried about their benefits, I'm a pension actuary. We can talk about funding Social Security. For all the business owners out there, I'm a small business owner myself. I worked in the public sector as a teacher. I was in a union, and I advocate unions as a free market solution. And finally, as an actuary and who's done pension and health valuations, and who has family covered under the Affordable Care Act. You know, the two issues with Brad are going to be the debt and the Affordable Care Act. And I'm going to be the guy to go out there and debate him best and make people less scared of everything. Thank you.
Mr. Shield.
Well, first of all, thank you all for your time today. I appreciate it. I appreciate every time you show up. I'd ask that you ask your friends and neighbors to show up as well. Because hiring outside firms, bringing in lots more money into the system is not the answer. Arguing for women's rights and reproductive rights because you own a yoga studio isn't exactly the answer. No offense to any of the candidates that we have here. Mr. Richards doesn't have the legal education and the training that I have. I think when you elect a legislator, you need someone who understands the law, who sees it on the front line, and who can write a better law. Mr. Wenstrup doesn't have that experience. Mr. Wenstrup talks about three things. He talks about pro-choice or pro-death. He talks about health care, and he talks about national security. And he really hasn't done anything to help anyone on any of those issues. Now, he's got a pretty lousy record. He and I both went to the same high school. We were both taught to be men for others. And as I've said a number of times in this campaign, I question which others he's standing up for. Because he's not standing up for the people of the district that we live in. He's not standing up for our friends, our families, and our neighbors. And growing up here all my life, with the education and training that I have, I feel I can best represent your voice in Washington and write better laws. Thank you very much. Vote for me on May 6th.
Mr. Richards.
Well, like I said to John the other night, I'm glad that he and Representative Wenstrup were raised to be men for others. I am the others. I am neither an attorney nor an actuary. I sort of feel like the odd man out is the carpenter. I'm reminded of what my father used to tell me when he was in his 60s. He said, every year I think about how dumb I was 5 years ago. And I don't think that education necessarily buys you wisdom. But I've been a student my whole life. I've read American history, American economics, world history. And I just think I bring a totally different perspective to the race. And I think I will, if we can elect a few more like me, we'll bring a totally different perspective to Congress. And thank you very much. I've loved the questions, and bless you all.
Okay, before I let you go, I want to point out that these are not the only Democrats running for office. Mr. McNeely, where are you? There you are. Ken is running in, what is that?
66.
66, and that's southern Clermont County and
All of Brown County.
And all of Brown County. And Mr. Collier, you're running against my favorite, Forrest Becker.
John Becker. Yes, sir. 65 district.
And then Rich is running against David Hubel, my ex-opponent, and more power to him. And I do think my problem, aside from being a Democrat, aside from being unknown, is I'm a very, very polarizing figure. I don't think we need to keep that in mind as we go forward, but I think we got a strong slate of candidates, and it's about time that we showed these people they can have all the money they want. There's two things you can't buy: happiness, which you can print it, and the second thing is the integrity of the voters. If you want to stand around, please chit-chat with the candidates. They're interesting people to know. We need to leave. Yes, sir. Oh. Okay, we got to leave the room clean. I have to tell you that.